Hi guys, once again, bienvenidos to Todo en Vida podcast. We are officially on episode 14. I always look forward to filming days just because I know that these episodes are always perfect timing. Everything like I've said, and I've been pretty repetitive with it, but I want you guys to know, these are just organic conversations that either I'm having with you guys as my audience, or today, like I have a special guest. It's going to be my little brother, Toe Jam. That's not his real name. I always introduce him as that, but go ahead, introduce yourself.
Hello, my name is Oham, but you can call me OG. It's kind of a household name. My family calls me. I prefer it over Toe Jam for sure. Definitely over Toe Jam.
He's gotten multiple nicknames over the course of years. OG actually stands for his initials, so OG and then last name E for Estrada. But I don't know how I came up with Toe Jam a few years back, but the reason why I wanted to go ahead and have him today on my podcast is just because it's something that I've always wanted to go ahead and do. I feel like a lot of you guys have gotten to hear my story, my upbringing, and just overall my struggles and how I've been able to overcome them. But there's been somebody that's had a front row seat to everything, and that's been my little brother, which has been cool because it's been able to give him some diversity to be able to learn from it. So today I'm just going to be having a conversation with him and just kind of talking about that, what it was like growing up. So just to give you guys a little bit background story, I know he's a little bit nervous right now, but just to give you guys some background story, my little brother Oham, he was born here in Glendale, and at the age of 3 years old, he ended up moving out to Texas with his mom. And ever since then, he's been there. He comes for summers, he comes for holidays. And so that means that at a very young age, I was held responsible for my little brother because, again, my dad, he's always been working, self-employed. So he's always done his thing. And then when my little brother would come for summers, I was the one to be responsible for my little brother. We have two older brothers. We have the one that passed away. His name's Eric. And then we have our second brother, Nathan. And then he has a brother on his mom's side, Justin. And then it was me. So technically, he has 4 older siblings. And then it's him right at the end. He's the baby of the group. But I kind of just wanted to give you guys a little bit of perspective on how he's been able to see me grow. He's been able to see me struggle and how that's essentially impacted his life. He's 16 years old right now. He's going to be turning 17 in September. So it kind of gives insight on the things that he got to see. You get to hear my story from his perspective, and also too, just overall hear his side of the story, how that's impacted him as well. So we'll start off with the beginning. What's probably one of the moments that impacted you the most seeing me grow up, because I used to take you with me to school. You would be in classrooms with me when I was trying to get my diploma and stuff like that. So what do you think has been the most impactful thing to see with me helping raise you?
I think it was definitely you going to school, because I feel like now that you've been able to do something without it, it makes me believe that you can follow a passion and make that your career, that you don't really need the diploma, to get a 9 to 5 or a job.
Also too, that's something that I didn't have that choice, because I had to chase something else because I didn't have the stability that thankfully you've been able to have. And another thing, well, as we talk about stability, it's really different for you in Texas because your mom is stable and she's been a single mom, but she's always been there for you. And then you have life out here where it's kind of different for you. Dad has always been just so busy working. You've had to been raised by your older sibling, your older sister. And then when you get out there, you have your mom present, and you do have an older sibling out there. But how would you describe the difference in dynamics from Texas to Cali? If you could just kind of give some insight to the audience and the difference of the two.
The difference of the two is I feel like here, you being my sibling, we still, even though you were my guardian, we still kind of have that sibling relationship where you wouldn't really have to discipline me because I was I kind of always believed in your say, so I didn't really have to go by the rules,
Yeah.
I could disobey.
I think really. I didn't have to discipline you, but I definitely did have to guide you in the right direction, and I think you did a really good job too of leaning towards the right things to do because you had the examples of our older siblings that didn't really have that stability or that guardianship over you, So over here you were raised with me, and then tell me what it's life back home.
Life back home, it was different because I was with my mom, and being the youngest sibling and having such a big age gap between all of us, everyone moved out, you know, so like I was always like, it always felt like I was the only child, even though I was the youngest, you know, in
Right.
Texas.
Yeah. And your life in Texas, I mean, you're there a majority of the year. You only come for summers and like holidays. But how would you say that, even though we have such an age gap in between all of us, how would you say there was a difference for you being able to see all of our like failures, successes, and just all the different routes that each sibling took?
To be honest, I feel like the only thing I could do is like probably just try and be like as wise as I could to like prevent myself from making like those mistakes. Even though I'm young, like I'm gonna make mistakes.
Yeah.
But I feel like the least I could do is do my best to prevent as least from happening. You know, even though you do learn from it. I feel like I don't know, like it could always go both ways, really, with that.
Yeah, definitely, definitely. I think that for you, even though you were the youngest and you knew that we kind of all had an age gap in between you and we all were doing our different things, I think that at a very young age though, and like how I was telling, you know, my producer prior to starting the episode, and even what how I've told you is like, when the moment you were born, and I already kind of knew the dynamic that we had with the older siblings. You know, you came to know it later on because they ended up being your siblings as well. But I already knew the dynamic that we had with our older siblings. So at a really young age, I knew not only the family we came from, the dynamic of older siblings that we had. I felt this sense of like responsibility over you, even more so when you moved out to Texas, because I didn't know how to try to be like present in your life while being so far away as well, you know? So I did try to go ahead and like kind of heal that sense in me that upbringing in me that didn't really have stable or siblings to look up to, you know? So when you were born, I was kind of like, all right, I know sooner or later he's going to need some guidance. He's going to need some help. So why not try to be that for him, you know? What was it like for you seeing my evolution of like my business, my platform on TikTok? Like, you got to see it from the perspective of like being in Texas, but give me your insight on how that was.
It was crazy because I remember like scrolling through my For You page on TikTok and I just seen like your account and then 1,000,000 likes on the video. And I remember that was after like the Christmas or summer I had came and like your business was barely starting. Like you were still like doing your stuff in the loft on like a foldable bed. Like you just started. And whenever I seen that video and you got 1,000,000 views, the first thing I did was call you and I was like, yo, since when? And then I came that summer and then your setup was like better, like way better. Yeah. And then you just had more business coming in. I was like, wow, like it's happening. This is where it's happening.
Yeah. Do you think that it was a difference for you to see like, cause you know how it was before, like you remember like us trying to do things and like just try to enjoy our summers, and you saw how like financially I was very limited, you know? And the moment that you saw things kind of just start to take off, like, how did you feel? Like, what was your perspective on that? Because you really saw it, like you saw it through social media, but then you came home. And I think that's kind of cool about how often you come and like the gaps in between, because you get to see so much progress every time you come, you know?
Right. Yeah, everything would always change when I came back. And like and when I did, it was like, I mean, to be honest, I kind of forgot what you said.
No, it's okay. It's okay. What I was trying to say was is that given how often you would come and spaced out, you know, in between, you got to see the progress of me each time kind of growing in the ladder. You know, you got to see me start my business. You got to see me be financially stable. And then you got to see me go to school. So each single time you got to see me in a different chapter of my business. How do you feel like that impacted you? And honestly, too, like your life, too?
Well, to be honest, I would only come like twice a year. So like you said, as each time I would come, it would always progress. So like every time I would come for a summer or like for Christmas, your business would just be booming like even more. And I just knew that because like we you know, we ate extra good around that time. But like even like aside from that, like even like you had I remember you sent me the text where you're like, I got a house. I was like, what? I was like, no way, like finally. And I feel like when you send me that specific text, that's when it sank in like she's a real esthetician, like and she's doing it, you know, because that was after we moved out of Eastville the second time.
Yeah, I remember that. do you feel like I kind of set the example of like stability through our siblings? Like you got to see it from your perspective, you know? But ultimately, like too, like I said, like I tried to kind of heal the part of me that didn't really have that stability growing up. So when you got to enjoy that, do you feel like you got to see and really soak in kind of like what you could do being self-employed?
Definitely. But I also saw how much you had to like work too. Cause like, yes, like the fruits of your labor were very, you know, we enjoyed it, but it did like, I definitely acknowledged how much like work you had to put in. Cause I would see like you plan your schedule, you like release your schedule. That's when I saw like, okay, like, you know, like she got this, but like only through like hard work, bro. Like
Yeah.
that's really the only way you can.
And I've talked a lot about my struggle on the podcast, and I think that, like I stated even before starting this episode, it's really, really hard to take credibility for something that I did when it was either fight or flight. I really had no option to progress in life because, again, I had no option. So it kind of feels, when I'm receiving the credit, it feels as though you're applauding a fish for swimming. It's something that I just had to do. I had no choice but to progress and do something with my life. But tell them a little bit about you having a back seat to seeing my struggle. Like, what are some things that you can remember and just like tell them from your perspective?
Honestly, I definitely remember like probably like it just felt like we were just like drained because like I feel like you would have worked so hard, like we didn't really have a social life, you know? So like even though you could afford like us going on those trips, it was kind of hard to make time to do so, you know?
Mm-hmm.
It was kind of hard to make time to do so.
No, definitely. Do you feel like seeing me being a business owner and trying to be present with you here during summers, and then also being financially responsible for you, but having to make a way to be able to be financially responsible for you, do you feel like that made you learn a little bit more about your mom? Because she's also a business owner. She's also having to make time for you and create that balance. So do you feel like that allowed you to understand her a little bit more?
Definitely, especially because she's in like the trucking industry. She owns like 18-wheelers. So like I come home from school and like she's like frustrated trying to find a driver to like to haul her shipment.
Yeah.
And like so like it's kind of hard for her to worry about making me dinner when she's trying to make a living. You
Yeah.
know?
No, definitely. I think that's been able to give you a good understanding, having that diversity and the struggle and seeing us try to balance so many things. I think that that's great for you to see, because a lot of people in this generation, your generation, my generation, they tend to be really like entitled, you know, like their main focus is on what's mom going to make for dinner, when you're being able to see like she needs someone to get that shipment out, you know? So that's good that you're able to have a little bit more understanding. Have you ever felt any pressure from, one, being raised from women? And I think that also too, you've been able to see like we haven't really had the best male figures in our lives, you know, both your mom and I. And we've been, aside from dad, of course, you know, we've been one of like the main ones to take part in like your upbringing and stuff, you know? So do you feel like that's put any pressure on you at all in the future as a partner, as one day? I know you're only 16, turning 17 right now, but you know, how does that look for you like in the future? Do you think about that stuff?
Definitely to a certain extent. I feel like seeing those kind of things kind of has like adapted my mentality when it comes to some aspects of life for sure.
Yeah, that's good. That's really good. I think that what you do now establishes your future. So what you do at this age currently, and of course it's okay to make mistakes. It's okay to learn from your mistakes, but essentially the decisions that you decide to take now, I do want to emphasize, are going to be what set the tone and foundation for you in the future, especially as a young man, you know, because it's not something that you have to fully grasp right now, but eventually, like, you're going to be head of household. Eventually, you're going to have to be almost like the male figure to someone, the way that your mom and I needed that as well, you know? And just touching on that subject, I think that while you still have room to grow, I had asked you in the car, like, through my struggles, through my failures, through my successes, you've been able to learn a lot. Now, in the aspect of relationship, like, you also were front and center when like my marriage fell apart. So do you feel like that has been able to give you any insight? Like, tell me tell me from your perspective what you saw during that time and what you learned from during that time. Because I talked about it on the podcast, but like you saw it.
Honestly, it had it from like a learning standpoint. It had its pros and cons because I learned a lot of things, but at the same time, I experienced a lot of things I also didn't want to. So I feel like around that time, I almost kind of like disassociated with a lot of it because like it's not something like, because I'm like, when I come out here for summer, when you think of summer, it's like, oh, like fun, like, but that wasn't really like, it was kind of a summer of just like sadness, low key, like, cause there wasn't really like much good energy around the house, like low key.
That was last summer. So we're at the ending of this summer for you, and that was last summer. How do you feel like the progress from where I was last summer? How do you feel it now? How do you feel it was this summer? Were you able to see how not having the correct person in your corner can definitely influence your entire life and everything around it?
Honestly, yeah, because I feel like when you have someone like that, it's just a liability. Because I feel like it was a much more harder to do the things we wanted to do to that. Because like it's not, because when we're planning things out, it wasn't just for me and you, it was for you, me, and you know what I'm saying. So like on top of that, like it was kind of harder to have like that sibling bond, you know, when there was a third person kind of there.
No, yeah. And that's something too that like I've told my little brother about, but that's also something too that I definitely want to acknowledge to the audience. Like, never allow a partner to come in between you and your sibling. And if they do, just know that that is not healthy at all. And I think that was a huge pivoting point for me to step away from that relationship, when they came in and made comments about you, or they tried to have their say in our relationship and the things that you were allowed to do in my household. And I just didn't like that. So if there's anybody out there right now that's currently battling between, you know, the relationship between your sibling, especially a younger sibling, I feel like that definitely hits different, because they are the eyes that see you growing up. You know, you definitely got to see me growing up, and to have that relationship compromised by any means necessary because of who I had in my life was just off limits. And when that relationship came to diminish, you were the one there to literally at such a young age even help try to pick up any pieces, you know? And you really didn't have to, but like, talk about being a road dog. Like literally.
It was hard not to be honest. Like, I mean, like it was much easier for me to like be there and like kind of be that shoulder to cry on, rather than to just like sit back and watch. Because I feel like watching that and like watching you go through that shit, all I wanted to do was like, fuck, like how can I help? Like what can I do to like be of assistance? But like all I could do is just watch. It's kind of, it was rough.
Yeah, it was a tough situation, but also too, it's a situation that you got to learn from, you know, and you get to be very, very particular on who you decide to create that foundation with and who you decide to create a life with. Now, obviously that came to be an example even between your dad, well, our dad and your mom. Because believe it or not, people will see this episode, see how we look exactly alike and expect us to have the same mom and dad, but we don't. We have the same dad, but we've never ever said like, oh, it's a half sibling type of thing. I honestly, like technically, if you think of it, this is the first time we talk about it. Technically, you're my half brother, but like we've never ever had it in that perspective of like being my half brother, you know, just because of how close we were growing up. But back to the topic of who you have as a partner really sets the tone for your future. You got to see the separation between your parents at a very young age, and you got to see how that was difficult on you growing up, you know, because you were in Texas and dad was here in California. So give me a little bit, again, just your perspective on how that may affect young kids or like young teenagers, you know?
Well, I feel like no matter what, you're going to be like a product of your environment. So like no matter what situation you're in, all you can do is really like deal the cards you were dealt and just honestly do your absolute best to just make something out of it and like not look at the cup just half empty. I know you've said that before, but it's like there's really no other way to put it, you know, because like if you want it bad enough, you know, you're going to go get that shit. But
that's the thing though, too. A lot of people don't see it in the perspective that you just stated it. I've said that, and because you've been a product of like me as well, because you've been able to see like my upbringing. Obviously, you're your own person. You're going to make your own decisions, but you've had me to see as a lot of like examples. You know, one thing is to see our parents. I think another thing is to see our siblings and have that close relationship where you get to see them progress. You get to see them make mistakes. And it's obviously a relationship that's much more vulnerable than when our parents make mistakes. But you even being able to express that, like, to extent, like how we just said, to an extent, you're going to be a product of your environment. But if you want it bad enough, you're going to go and chase it. That's a message that I've tried to convey a lot on this podcast. And the reason why I wanted you on here today is because I know that I've, to a certain extent, instilled that in you. And now you have that mentality as well. So one thing that you haven't really had, I want to say like the best outcome of is obviously not having dad in the same state as you. So how do you feel like you've been able to still grow to be your own young man without being able to have him physically present because he is in a different state, but then also too, because he's always working? So how have you been able to become your own person just due to an extent, his absence? He's a great provider. You know, you were telling me that in the car, but how do you feel like you've been able to grow into your own person without having that male figure around? And how have, as a result of that, you've been able to be more like merciful of dad because he's always working?
To be honest, I think I was just blessed enough to have like a support system that can level up like a family where like I can go back and I could talk to them and like and just look at them as like a role model, to be honest, and as a brother, really, because I feel like without that, you're kind of stranded on your own, and you kind of look out to other like sources of role models, you know, whatever that may be, you know, whatever that may be, or whoever.
Definitely. What would you? Because there's a lot of moms that listen to this podcast. I'm not too sure if, you know, my targeted audience in any of it has been, you know, young teenage boys or anything like that. But what would you try to convey to young teenage boys that probably don't have a male figure present or probably don't have the best foundation? Like, what would you tell them to not use that as an excuse that they didn't have their dad physically present? And it could be due to work. They could still be great providers, or they could just not be around. Like, what would you tell someone that doesn't have that role model or that example?
That's a real loaded question, to be honest, because I mean, like, I'm a 16-year-old myself, so like I still fuck up. Yeah. So pardon my French, but in terms of like trying to find a role model, I feel like it's really up to the person. Like, it really does depend like on the person, because like I said, if you're a product of your environment, the kind of people you want to look up to is going to vary, whether it's a like good role model or a negative one, you know?
Yeah.
Because it's not all role models are going to be good.
Right.
They're always going to have either bad or negative. I mean, negative or positive impact.
Well, you've had both. You've had positive role models, and then you've had negative role models. What did you take from the negative role models? Because there's some people that only have negative, and you had both. You had positive and negative. So what were you able to take from the negative role models?
Honestly, just to learn how to be like just a better, like just have human decency, like how to learn. Like, I just learned how to have human decency, because I feel like with a negative role model, they can kind of teach you bad habits, and you kind of inherit bad, you just do worse. But with the positive role model, I feel like they hold you more accountable and doing better, and making better decisions. I
definitely feel like I've been able to hold you accountable, but also to be vulnerable with like understanding that as my younger sibling, you are watching me. So I feel like there's been times where, same way I've had to hold you accountable, I've also had to set the example. And one thing that I didn't want for you growing up was to make you feel like you could never tell me where I was messing up at too, you know? Because if you're going to be the example for someone or try to lead as an example, this is just my perspective as your older sibling. If you're going to try to be an example for someone, you also have to lead by example, and you have to be willing to be open to constructive criticism, because if not, then it's going to allow you to be super closed-minded, and that's not how you're going to progress or grow at all, you know? So one thing that I always wanted you to know in the back of your head was that you could hold me accountable, you know, because you were really young when I was going through everything, but also too, when I would make my mistakes, I also was aware that you were going to be watching. So I had to really like tread lightly, whether that was in relationships, whether that was the way that I carried myself or whatever, you know? So just always keep that in mind. Like, we have a really good relationship, and it's good to be able to get your perspective on things sometimes, on how, I know you don't have all the answers because you're still so young, but like, it's good for your sibling to be able to hold you accountable, or because how good they know you, they're like, hey, you're lacking on this, you're lacking on that, you know? So that's also really, really good to have. Other than that, where do you see yourself in a few years? How do you feel like your role models around you have influenced what you want to do in the future, whatever it is that you want to do?
Honestly, probably just building a life for myself. Because like, I mean, like, I want a family. Like, I want a family. I want to have like a dog and like kids, obviously, right? And I feel like the only way I could like get to that point is being able to have the resources to afford that.
No, definitely.
So just honestly building a life for myself, really.
Yeah. Do you feel like maybe, I mean, you were really young at the time, but did you ever remember when we didn't have those financial resources to be able to do certain things?
Honestly, yeah, because I just remember a lot of movie nights. I like a lot of movie nights, and like we definitely didn't have as much freedom as we do now. Like, as you said, like we're more restricted in terms of like things we can do. And even when we would do them, it wouldn't be like on a consistent basis, really.
Yeah.
Like at all.
No, definitely, because finances were a lot more limited. So I think that that just made things overall harder. Like I said in the beginning of the episode, the reason why I wanted to have you on this podcast is to be able to not only get your perspective, but also see how there were some pivoting moments, I'm sure, in your upbringing that through the examples of either myself or your mom or the siblings that weren't really all the way stable made an influence on your upbringing. So can you tell me about any other times or moments that influenced your mindset to be what it is now? It could be the struggle, it could be good, it could be bad, whatever.
Honestly, it would probably be like all the nights we would sleep in the truck with dad. And because I would only come twice a year, like I wouldn't experience it for very long. But like I remember having to sleep in the truck with y'all, and like it would be like four of us in the truck, and I was the smallest, but like I'm claustrophobic, so like those were like not very fun. Like no one likes sleeping in the truck in Los Angeles, waking up in the heat where like we couldn't brush our teeth, shower.
Yeah.
Those were definitely moments I feel like I can recall best.
Yeah. No, that definitely was hard. I think that we've came a long way ever since then. It was crazy because you had both worlds where like you would go to Texas and you would be stable. Maybe your mom wasn't able to give you like luxuries right away because she was still building herself. So just to kind of give you guys a little background story, my stepmom was with my dad for 15 years, and she kind of just got to a point where she just decided to choose herself. And I don't blame her for that. I don't know if you know, but when I was younger, the relationship between your mom and I was very strained because I was younger and I just didn't understand certain things, you know? And then once I grew up and I got to get a little bit better understanding of not only life in general, but what it was to be a young woman, and just realized that she had to take on a lot, our relationship got a lot better. And that's where she started including me and helping raise you and stuff like that. And a big reason why I've always been willing to step up in helping raise you, especially when I started to have that financial freedom, was because I know your mom really had to do it by herself. Yes, she did have dad's income to be able to help her monthly, but your mom's always been the type to like go get it. Your mom's always been the type to not stay with content with whatever anybody could give her. She always wanted to have her own source of income or anything like that. So that's why I've just never minded being able to step up and be that I don't want to say a role model to my older sibling, but be of assistance, better said, because I don't think I'm a role model to anybody really. I think the only way that I've been able to be a role model to you is because I've been able to show you both my struggle and my success, and I just kept going. So that's really, really good. And I'm glad that you've been able to see it from a back seat, because not many people have. I come on the podcast and I talk a lot about what I've been through, but no one's really been able to see, obviously, like firsthand, you know, because it's something that I just had to deal with. But when you would come for summers, you got to see it. And because I've been able to be so close and like raising you, I've been able to instill a lot of these lessons into you, which is I think why you have the mentality that you do now. You're very young, you're still going to learn, you're still going to, have faults or, just mess up overall. But I think it's okay. And like I was telling you in the car, like it's a good thing that you've been able to have this foundation at such a young age so that when you grow up and if you do make a mistake, you have somebody to fall back on, So just never, ever take that for granted. There's a lot of people that don't have that foundation. I'm sure maybe you've gone to see that with your peers at school. Do you see what the difference is when people don't have that foundation, whether it be from kids at school or family members that maybe didn't have as much stability?
Honestly, yeah. And it's not really hard to spot because like I'll see kids like wearing the same shoes or like same shirt and like people will like make fun of them, but like deep down I feel bad for the kid because like they're probably like most of the time they're raised by their grandparents. Like they don't even have their own parents to actually raise them. They're raised by grandparents. And honestly, I'm sure that kind of situation has its pros and cons because I've personally never got to experience it. But like I don't know. I've always been a mama's boy. I don't know if I could.
It's easy to be able to spot, like you said, it's easy to be able to see when people have that struggle and when people have a little bit more stability. I think you're still at a very young age where you got to see it to a certain extent growing up, but like you didn't really fully grasp everything, which is not your job to, but there was times where your mom tried to make sure that growing up, let's say, for example, just an example, like you were raised in like Gap and like in Old Navy, right? Which ain't nothing wrong with Gap or Old Navy, but it got to a point in your school where like kids started to rock like Jordans and Nikes and this and that. And your mom always tried to make sure you were up to date because she wanted you to have the best of the best, But again, I think it was really good that you had her there. But then when you came to California, you got to see like the harsh reality of not having stability. There was a point in time where you were dead set on wanting to come to live in California. Do you remember that?
Very vividly, honestly. Yeah.
Yeah. So my little brother was really dead set on wanting to come and live in California because, of course, my dad projected to be like the cool parent and there was really no structure or discipline over here, which is why I think you, at a young age, that you don't really want structure, you don't really want discipline. And then you get to an age where you start to realize that you do need it. It's essential to your growth and to the foundation that you're going to create for yourself or be able to build off of, right? So at one point, you really, really wanted to come and live in California. What was the pivoting point for you to realize, like, California ain't it? Aside from, like, the politics and the taxes and everything else you told me, as far as lifestyle from here to Texas and your stability over there, what was the point for you to realize, like, this is not for me?
Honestly, I think it was that even when I was here for summer, like dad still wouldn't be home. So like even my mom would tell me, like she would make it a point where like your dad isn't gonna look after you during the school year, let alone summer. Like that's like mom, she was just not gonna allow that simply because like she knew she took care of me.
I give your mom a lot of credit because she put her foot down even when she seemed to be the bad guy. But in the long run, I think we've gotten to see like it was really for your own good. And I think a lot of children growing up don't really realize that sometimes their parents have to create discipline or structure so that they can succeed and so that they can go farther in life. So we tend to not want that when we're younger until we get older and we realize how much we actually needed it. So your mom did a really good job of always being one to put her foot down, what was best for you. And have you come to appreciate it? Have you come to see her efforts?
Honestly, definitely. It's kind of hard not to, cause like you said, she's self-employed. She works from home, so like every day I get back from school, like she's there. Like I wake up, she's at the desk, and I come back from school, she's at that desk.
Yeah.
So like I feel like it makes it. I don't know. Like I feel like when I act out, it's kind of hard not to look back on that and think like, fuck, like you're not benefiting her whatsoever. You're just bringing her down.
Yeah, that's something that, again, you're going to be growing up, so you have to make your mistakes. But it's something that I had to at one point tell you, like, I had to at one point put it into perspective for you too. Like, hey, she doesn't have a partner that's going to look after her and take care of her. I know you're really, really young, but you have to be able to step up and help her where you can, whether it's taking out the trash or simply just not being a badass kid. Like, there's a saying in Spanish that says, pórtate bien que nada te cuesta. Because when you get older, you come to realize cuánto te cuesta portarte mal. Y portándote bien no te cuesta nada. Because just a little bit of mix of both. Even Dad has said life, and again, just, pardon my French, but this is exactly how my dad put it. Life is like a pile of shit. You got to try to walk through it without getting yourself dirty. And you're going to walk through it with no intent to get in trouble with the law, to do things wrong, or, just to try to have a solid, make good choices in life. And you have to try to walk through that pile without getting yourself dirty. So just always keep that in mind. Like, no te cuesta nada portarte bien. If anything, te va a costar todo portarte mal. So as you continue to grow up, these are things that you have to understand, and also to take in your blessings, which I know you do. And I know that you're at a young age where you can't fully grasp that, but I need you to understand that, like, you were given a really solid foundation, and it took a lot out of me as your older sister to create that turnaround where, like, our older siblings, let's be real, they were not the examples. They really didn't just show us the way to do things, I understand that everybody has their own life path and journey, but the moment that I knew not only what it was as far as like our family goes and what our household was like, because the struggle came even prior to you being born, when you were born in the middle of struggle. And that was the point that we had to, like, really progress in life, because now your mom was accountable for one more person. Dad was accountable for all of us. And I was, to an extent, accountable for you, because I was like, what am I going to do? Am I going to allow, like, the older siblings to take charge of him? And where is that going to get him? I knew that at a really young age. I knew that at the age of even 10 years old. And when I say you were born in the middle of struggle, you were literally born in the middle of struggle. So you weren't even a year yet, and we were already homeless. And I remember that it got to a point where, like, a little bit after your first birthday, we went to go live with Uncle David. And this is, I don't know if it's something that, your mom has ever told you, but we got kicked out at like 2 a.m. because Uncle David's wife just had her way of being, and that's fine. But we ended up getting kicked out, and there was 5 of us in a car. You were one of the 5. And I remember that we had no place to put you. So they made a bed for you on the dashboard because you were the tiniest. So then your mom had a gallon of milk because, you were already drinking milk at the time. So because it was so cold throughout the night, she thought that we could just put it in the trunk and it would stay okay. By like 8 a.m, the milk was already bad. And we barely had any money to even put in the gas tank. So it's like, when I tell you, you were born in the middle of a struggle, like, you really, really were. And I know that that's something that you can't fully grasp because you were present, but you didn't really, like, live it full on. And that's great that you didn't have to, I think with already the struggles you've been able to see and the diversity that you've been able to experience has been enough for you to, like, try to make proper choices. You're young, you're still growing up, but I just want you to know, like, how blessed you've been and how much it takes the person to turn things around, whether that was Dad, whether that was your mom, whether that was me, and just take any negative influence or take any negative role model in your life as an example of what not to be. And this goes for anybody listening out there. You can be raised in the middle of a struggle. You can be raised in the middle of turmoil, and you can still decide to make a difference in your life. It's never too late. It's just about how much effort you want to put into making your situation better. That was the whole point of today's episode. And the topic of today's episode is being able to give them a perspective of my struggle through your eyes, how it's impacted you growing up, but also to allow it to be an example for even the people that are listening as to, you can have both. You can have positive examples to take from. You can have negative examples to take from. You can have a foundation. You cannot have a foundation. There's so many different dynamics here. You know, you were the one that had foundation. I didn't have foundation. You were born in the middle of turmoil, and then there was people around you that were able to make a difference so that you didn't have to experience that. But for the people that are mainly listening out there that don't have that example, use that as the example. Use the negativity, use the negative influences, use the negative role models as an example to be better in life. And if you're blessed enough to have a positive role model in your life, don't take it for granted, because it took a lot for that person to make a difference in their own life so that you could do better, so that you could have a fair shot. And if your life wasn't perfect growing up, that's fine, because ultimately diversity creates a beautiful struggle, and it creates a beautiful outcome if you want it to be. If not, then be a product of your environment and stay where you're at. But today's episode was able to just kind of tell them a little bit about everything. And I just wanted to use our upbringing as an example, you know, and also to give them a little bit of faith that the youth still has a fair shot, and they still are witnessing things, and they're still learning from certain things. Other than that, you know, just to wrap up the episode pretty soon, is there any questions that you may have for me at the top of your head?
Honest, what made you like decide like what made you drop everything and be like, I'm gonna become an esthetician and like just start like going after it?
Well, one, I didn't have the stability of school. I didn't even graduate high school. You saw me trying to go to school. I was still present in helping raise you. I was aware that our dad was self-employed and there was no such thing as like a retirement. I came to crave stability at a really young age is what I'm trying to say. And when I came to crave that stability, I did a little bit of everything. I worked in fast food jobs. I worked in hospitality. I worked in retail, because I had to do something other than going to school. I couldn't afford to go to university. I couldn't afford student loans. I couldn't afford any of that, nor did I have the stability to be present in a classroom. So I knew that because I'm not a man, I can't do blue collar work. I knew that I had to, what was the one best thing that I could do, which was beauty industry. It's a industry that is really never going to come out of, it's recession proof is essentially what I'm trying to say. Like, the beauty industry is an industry that's going to continue to grow, and it's not going to go anywhere anytime soon, because people are always aging. They're always wanting to feel good about themselves. We all have insecurities that we want to, you know, mend and stuff like that. So I was like, okay, I want to be a service provider, but I had no idea how to even get started. So then I was like, okay, well, what kind of service would I want to provide? I had to like narrow it down, right? So I was like, can't go to school. I'm not a man. I can't be blue collar. And I want to be a service provider, but what kind of service do I want to provide? So I was like, can't do hair. I'm going to be honest. People be lying all the time. You be asking them like, what kind of dye did you have in your hair? They say nothing. And next thing you know, their hair is frying off. So props to all the hairdressers out there, because it's a really hard skill and, you know, service to be able to provide. I didn't want to be a hairdresser. I could probably do nails. I always wanted to do nails, but I knew that I needed something fast. Because at the time I was 23 years old, turning 24, and I needed a solid income fast. And I knew with nails, while I could have a love for it, I just was intimidated by it. If I'm being completely honest, it was like the prep, the application, all that stuff. So whatever. I was like, lashes, not my thing. And then I talked about wanting to become a waxer. I don't know if you do remember when I used to pick out my eyelashes really bad.
Bro, yes.
Oh my gosh. Nobody talks about that. I used to pick out my eyelashes really bad, like really, really bad. And I got this satisfaction out of it because it was a impulse disorder. Like, I would get really nervous and I would get anxious and I would pick out my eyelashes. So I was like, how hard would it be to rip off some hair? And I don't mean to discredit any estheticians out there. I don't, because obviously I quickly came to see how much technique, skill, product knowledge and everything came behind it. But I was like, okay, well, I have the ability to make people feel comfortable. When Uncle David was passing away, I was, for a little bit, one of his caregivers. And, you have to do things in the medical field, whether it's just, keeping up with their hygiene and stuff like that. And so I was like, okay, like if I could do it with my uncle, like I think I can make women feel comfortable too. So in long story short, I had to narrow it down. I knew I needed stability. I knew I couldn't go to school, and I knew that I had the ability to make people feel comfortable. So I was like, I'm going to try waxing. And I didn't even know what I was getting myself into. I really didn't. But I knew that with good intention and effort and resilience, I knew I was going to get somewhere. And faith, most importantly. I knew that faith was going to get me far. Faith and being secure in yourself can get you a lot farther than anything else in life. So I just kept that close to me, my faith. I stayed true to myself. I started up a business. I wasn't sure how I was going to do it, but I knew that I wanted to do it because I needed to do it. I had to do it. And then from there, it kind of just started to take off. My platform started to take off. It was all super organic. I think you can attest to the fact that I've always been like, my personality has always been what it is. And I just knew that I wanted better because I knew that I didn't want to be a product of my environment, because my environment growing up was close to shit, if not worse. So I was like, okay, I got to do something. And this is what I found. People have different passions. People have different roads that they decide to take. But this was it for me. And that's what I found. And I think that as drastic and dramatic as it may sound, like waxing really did save my life, because I was able to create financial stability for not only myself, but, an example for you too. So it was just a self-reflection, analyzing what I needed, what I could do, what was in reach and stuff like that. So that's how I got into waxing. It was a combination. I put a lot of thought into it before starting my business. And I think that when we tend to want to start a business, we always wait for the perfect time. There's never a perfect time. You just have to get started. The hardest part is starting. Once you start, be resilient, be strong in your faith, and be consistent. And I think that with that, it'll get you a lot farther than anything else. But other than that, do you have any questions for me, Toja?
Why don't you move to Texas?
Bro, I'm not going to move to Texas with all them. Never mind. I was going to say with all them white folks and bull riders.
That's the clientele you want.
No, I just think that Texas isn't for me. I think that I've established home in Cali. I think that this is just where home is. Also, too, I've established a business here. So Cali is always going to have my heart. Like, I know that they say it's super expensive. It's really, really hard. But I mean, we got planes. I could go see you. Like,
that's fair.
That's fair. Other than that was your last question?
Yeah.
Right. How did you feel today being on the podcast? How did it feel?
Like we rarely ever do like really sit, like if we do talk, it's usually like over the phone and it just starts rolling. But I feel like this is the first time we like sat down in front of each other and just like spoke.
Yeah, no, definitely.
So new.
Were you nervous?
Absolutely. I think you could tell.
I could tell. Each time you were like, honestly, and you're gonna look back at this episode and you're very, very critical of yourself. I am too. We were like, you nitpick every single thing, but I think that you answered to the best of your abilities. We all have something that we kind of have like a comfort word, especially when you're in front of a camera. Mine used to be, I think it was like, or what was it, Marmar, that I would always resort back to? Like is one of them for sure. That's a really common one, but it's a lot easier said than done to be in front of a camera. This is your first time. You're super, super young. And I think that the questions that were being asked were very vulnerable questions. So you try to answer them to the best of your abilities. Don't be too hard on yourself. I think you did a great job. And I think that I just am so glad to have this platform to be able to convey a message and have this conversation with you and just be able to kind of pick at your brain a little bit too, to see what it was like for you growing up with me as an older sibling, because I have the perspective of myself as obviously myself, and you have the perspective of me as your older sibling. So with that being said, I hope that anybody that's listening out there can just try to be that pivoting point in your, family's generation of just switching things up, try to be the example. And like I said, take the negative examples as an example nonetheless on things you guys don't want to do. Realize that there is somebody out there watching you, whether it's a younger sibling, whether it's a cousin, whether it's your children, there is somebody always watching you. And the difference can start with you. What you implement into the minds of the youth and what you implement into the minds of those around you are really going to make a difference. So just know we all don't have the easiest or luckiest of cards that are dealt to us. But if there's anything that you guys can learn from this episode today, is just do the best you can. You don't have to be perfect. Please try to find your way. Try to find that financial freedom. Try to find a passion, most importantly, and keep your faith super, super close to you. So thank you guys so much for tuning in to Todo Be That podcast. I really appreciate you guys. Make sure to follow us on all social media platforms. We're on Spotify, Todo Be That pod, or you could just follow me on my Instagram, _Ashley Scarlett, business page, Self-Care by Ash LLC, and shout out to Odessa, Texas for tuning in. Thank you guys so much. You guys have a great night, day, wherever you're at, and I will see you guys on episode 15. Peace out. Say bye, Totem.
Toodles.